When Darth Bane appeared in the Clone Wars as a vision to Yoda, we cheered. Finally, the creator of the Rule of Two was now a solid piece of Star Wars canon. And no matter what happens, as long as the Clone Wars is canon, so is Darth Bane. A lot of us know the stories of the legendary Sith Lord, but we have to wonder, what did Darth Bane figure out that the Jedi could not? Well, it turns out he got everything right about his philosophies of the Force. Welcome everyone, I'm Gerald. The Force is the Force, or so we've been told. Neither Jedi nor Sith will falter from their beliefs to admit this fact. Both factions, Jedi and Sith, believe that there is a light side of the Force and a dark side. The other thought is that there is only the Force. It all depends how it is used. For the Jedi only practice the light side of the Force. Any dabbling in the dark side would be heresy against the Jedi Order and would spell certain doom for those learning the dark ways. For a Sith, concentrating on the dark side of the Force means power, but they have no rules against practicing the light side, although most reasons for practicing powers like Force healing would be for a selfish reason, if they ever use that type of ability. For example, if Darth Sidious had healed Darth Maul and gave him the Darth Vader treatment, it would only be because he needed Maul to further his own plans, not because he cared for the Sith assassin, but then you have those in the middle, such as the Bendu, beings with great Force sensitivity that just want to be left alone, not because they see themselves as better than the others, but rather they understand the nature of the Force and they know what great power can do. Power. That's a funny word when it comes to the Force. Jedi condemn those seeking power, yet they take children at a very young age to teach them to harness the power they are born with, teaching them to become strong in the Force. But to understand this way of thinking and how hypocritical it seems on the surface, the word power, in most cases spoken by the Jedi, is speaking of political power or monetary gain, power of domination over other life forms. But then we question Anakin Skywalker when he says he's more powerful than Obi-Wan Kenobi. He isn't talking about a hierarchical standing, he's talking about his abilities in the Force. Attuning themselves to the Force at a greater level is something all Jedi strive for, hence the meditations and training. So why did it seem like such a bad thing for Anakin Skywalker to understand that his powers in the Force were greater than that of his master? Whether the statement was true is irrelevant. It's something Jedi strive for. But then there's the other side, the Sith. The Sith understand as the Jedi that Force attunement gives them power. It's true in the Jedi as well. The Force gives them a power that most other beings can't even comprehend. But the Sith take it to the extreme. Not only do they crave to gain all they can from the Force, but they also use it to dominate all other life forms. But like I said, power is a funny word when it comes to the Force. We know the Force flows through all living things, and some are more in tune with it than others. But can the Force become weak if too many beings are able to wield it? Wow, that's a deep thought. And a lot of Star Wars fans will say no, that the Force is endless, infinite even. Let's think about that word, infinite. If the Force is manifest higher in a being with more midichlorians and is a symbiotic relationship with all living things, is all of life infinite? It's hard to imagine that there's an immeasurable amount of life, that it goes on forever. If we take all of life on Earth, because we don't know of life beyond that, it can be measured. There's a number we can associate with how much life is on our planet, from microorganisms and into the life forms like whales. We could potentially measure it with a number. It may take a century to count, but life on Earth is not an infinite number. So in turn, the resource on Earth is not unlimited. It can be measured. And we now know the Earth can support approximately 10 billion human beings before it begins to run out of resources. And I'm not talking about oil, the lifespan of that is likely much shorter. Just talking about food and oxygen producing plants and so on. When we think of life on a galactic scale, there would still be a measurable number. Note, galaxy, not universe nor multiverse. So if the Force feeds on life just as life feeds on the Force, it would be safe to say that the Force is not infinite. The Force is created by all living things. Now, I'll go back to my question. Could the Force become weaker with more beings able to wield it? Well, it only makes sense that it would. If life creates the Force, then more people using it would cause it to weaken as more and more have the ability. Case in point, the dark side of the Force became overwhelming to the Jedi in the Star Wars prequels. Tens of thousands of Jedi were wielding the Force at the time, but there were only a few Sith practicing the Force. If you take a gallon of water into a desert, you could survive on it a couple days alone. If you take that same gallon of water into the desert with 10 of your closest friends, that resource will run out much quicker. And this is why the Jedi were becoming weak during Palpatine's rise. The Sith ranks once numbered just as high as the Jedi until they were defeated and Darth Bane created the Rule of Two. There were two main reasons why he did this. The first is the thirst for power every Sith seemed to possess meant their own destruction from within. The power to dominate life was one of their aspirations, but I said power was a funny word when it comes to the Force, and that brings me to the second reason Darth Bane created the Rule of Two. Really, in a certain light, it's the same as the first reason. The more Sith using the Force, the weaker they would become. This meant the Sith would have to operate in the shadows until such a time that they could defeat the Jedi. But with the dark side of the Force now being concentrated into only 2 Sith Lords, 2 Sith could potentially be more powerful than 1,000 Jedi, if the Force is weakened. But this doesn't account for other Force users. Jedi and Sith aren't the only ones using it. For instance, young females of the Chiss ascendancy, called Skywalkers, could use the Force to navigate the dangerous chaos, aka the unknown regions. But these children would lose the ability into their teenage years. Chiss warships could use hyperspace travel, but only for short jumps without a Skywalker. Then there are the Night Sisters of Dathomir. It's highly debated whether their dark magic is actually the Force, but we will assume it is, as Star Wars mythology bases itself on the Force, so it only makes sense. The Night Sisters used a version of the dark side, and they were able to wield it without the dark side consuming them, thus weakening the Force further, especially aspects of the dark side. When most of the witches were wiped out, it helped Palpatine grow in strength. As I said in the beginning, the Force is the Force. It all depends how it's used as the results and future of its users, and this could mostly be true. But let's look at it from the standpoint of our own known physics and religions. The idea of the Jedi and the Force isn't unfamiliar to our own world. It is actually based on Eastern religions and philosophies. If the Force is just that, then energy in our own world would be just that. Energy is energy. But we know that is not true. There are multiple forms of energy: electric energy, nuclear energy, and even dark energy and matter. Then there's a spiritual energy. Whether that's a god or devil collecting souls or just our own consciousness is made up of energy that returns to the universe when we die. So maybe the Force just isn't just the Force after all. Maybe it's just a blanket word used to describe the abilities given to those sensitive enough to harness it. Maybe the dark side and the light side of the Force are separate energy fields, such as electricity and nuclear power. But being sensitive of the Force allows both to flow through its users, thus giving a moral compass to those able to wield it, or rather a choice of which energy field to tap into. It's evident that both flow through its users, as it's easy to fall to the dark side even after decades of training in the light. So when we think of how Palpatine was able to rise to power, we often debate it. Well, if the Jedi had done this or that, they wouldn't have been eliminated. But in reality, it wouldn't have mattered. Yes, the Jedi became arrogant, and they involved themselves in a war that should have been left to the warring factions. But their real downfall came from their weakness in the Force. Yoda even says the dark side clouds everything. With the tens of thousands of Jedi wielding the light side and only a couple Sith wielding the dark side, the energy had become weaker in the Jedi and stronger in the Sith. When Palpatine was defeated on the Death Star, how many Jedi were around? Not tens of thousands. There were only a few remaining Jedi. He wasn't defeated by an army, he was defeated by one. Then, We could also go back to the argument that the Force is unlimited, infinite, eternal, and that may be true. But look at the events in the Star Wars stories. The Sith were few and toppled the Jedi and the Republic. The Jedi were many and were almost erased from existence. Then the Jedi were few and toppled the Sith and the Empire. This idea could be the reason Luke Skywalker was so powerful, but the question could be asked then, how was Anakin Skywalker so strong in the Force if the light side was weak? Simple. The stronger dark side was always present in Anakin, and when he was at his strongest, it was the dark side that fueled him. We know this. We've seen his anger when he's fighting. Count Dooku even mentions it in their last duel. But I'd like to know what you think. Are the dark side of the Force and the light side separate, or two sides of the same coin? To me, Darth Bane figured it out, and his plan worked. The Jedi were defeated and the Sith ruled again. When the Jedi would begin to recover, the dark side would rise again to stop it. But leave a comment as to your thoughts on it, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It really does help my channel. Until the next video, I'm Gerald, and I'm a Star Wars fanatic. Thank you all for watching, and remember, this is the way, and positivity in the Star Wars fandom is the only way.